Greetings, dear listener. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new scary stories, and support me with a like. Enjoy listening.
Hello, everyone. I will tell you one story that was perhaps the most mystical in my life, and after which I forever and unconditionally believed in the existence of the otherworldly and inexplicable by common sense. The story will be long, but every single word in it is true and reality in its most severe form, so do not judge strictly for rudeness and expressions. Perhaps someone will say that the mysticism in it is doubtful, and all my arguments are just an impression of the oppressive atmosphere of the place that I will describe to you. But believe me, at least for the general development and expansion of horizons, it is worth reading this narrative to everyone. It will open their eyes to a lot, at least to modern medicine for sure. It was not so long ago, in 2005, a year earlier, I graduated from school, and like many naive young people and girls, I intended to go to college without fail, no less, of course, without doubting my knowledge, of which there were few, and instead of the institute I went to college, which is also, of course, not bad. Having successfully completed my studies almost before the exams, I unexpectedly, it is always unexpected, receive a summons where I am invited to undergo a medical examination for military service. Without thinking twice, I firmly and confidently decided to mow down, no matter what. Those who served in the army, of course, consider people like me to be cowards, but in my case, this is not so. At the age of 12, I read Kropotkin's book, Anarchy, Its Philosophy, Its Ideal, for the first time and became a convinced anarchist, which I am still, and no one is interested in it at the military enlistment office. There were several days left before the medical examination, and I made a simple decision, but the most correct and minimally harmful for me: to mow down the Durka. It was possible to pay off, but the family's not rich, and mowing down on drugs is not at all the same. You will have to go to the examination anyway, and it's better with idiots than with drug addicts, I thought then. As it turned out later, it's not better at all. And so, I carefully cut my veins, just a little, so as not to damage anything. The next day, with my head held high, I went to the military enlistment office. I will not describe the commission. Hoover was there knows. Of course, I get a stick from a psychiatrist from the military commissar because I spoiled all the statistics for them, and I get a coveted referral for examination to a psychiatric clinic in which I had to spend 21 unforgettable days. When I arrived at the admission, I was safely accepted into the ranks of patients and examined. My phone was immediately taken away. All my outerwear was taken and escorted to the ward. The first impression struck me to the point of amazement. The ward was for 40 people. I naively assumed 3-4 neighbors in the ward. The squad was not violent, but still not much fun. There were different people here, the same young mowers like me, factory peasants who caught a squirrel, psychos who lived here all their lives since childhood, who had a residence permit with the address of this psychiatric hospital in their passport, and even went to some kind of job. Not highly paid, but still outright schizophrenics, but not violent, quiet idiots who lived in this state all their lives, who learned to hold a spoon and not walk under themselves, but otherwise did not even realize their existence, drug addicts who went crazy. I learned all these varieties later. At the very first moment, they all seemed to me quite ordinary people. Someone was talking to a neighbor, someone was talking to himself, someone was picking his nose. The doctor turned out to be a normal person and settled me in a corner with conscripts, 6 people, about my age. But the adventures were just beginning. The next surprise was waiting for me in the dining room. What was given there could be called a meal with a big stretch, besides laced with sedatives including lowering sexual function. After each meal you feel sluggish and depressed. But that was not all. The next surprise was waiting. I'm in the bathroom. After lunch with other recruits and psychos, we went to smoke in the toilet. It was a room with an area of 16 meters at the extreme wall opposite the window. A concrete slab with crumbled tiles, and 5 holes were placed. into which antediluvian toilets were soldered to the very top. There were no partitions. But this is still half the trouble. The psychos relieved themselves, someone for themselves, someone enthusiastically picked at the EOP laughing merrily, and one turning away into a corner, Dr. Schauterswil. It stank terribly, although the room didn't smell like flowers either. Speaking of intemperance, schizophrenics, as I later learned, having graduated from a psychologist, do not have a sense of proportion. A few days after arriving, a friend came to me, brought something to eat, and this dressing room was on 2 tables. There was a patient with rapidly progressive schizophrenia at the next one. Such patients turn into a vegetable for some 6 months. This one was brought from home and settled with us, considering his illness a narcotic psychosis, but his relatives, not understanding the seriousness, considered him the same person, brought him fried chicken and salad in a container, and here he eats it all, without talking, for 5 minutes. Then his stomach, of course, can't stand it, and he safely throws up everything he eats on the floor. My relatives are shocked, and my friend and I are shocked. Then there were gray and boring days in the stench and other abominations. By the way, I would like to say that over the past 100 years, psychiatry has not advanced a step. Everything is the same as then. But that's where the mysticism began. Although, according to my feelings, the buildings themselves, of which there were 27 in the hospital complex, were built before the Revolution, and so were filled with mysticism, because this psychiatric hospital is historical. It is already more than 100 years old. Next to me on the next bed was a guy, about 30 years old, not a conscript obviously, adequate, but silent. On the very first night, and it was scary to fall asleep, I noticed that my neighbor, 10 minutes after lights out, started talking to someone, and from his words, I realized that he was being answered on the other side. So I heard only half of the dialogue. His half, the questions were different, from just everyday questions to questioning and arguing with evidence. This went on for 7 nights, and I was already used to falling asleep to his voice, and it was good, compared to those nights when someone started to get rowdy. On the second night, one started running around the beds and almost stepped on my head. Then he was twisted. The medical staff was there, as if they were specially selected. No emotions. They just do what they need to do. They injected haloperidol, and that's it. All psychos were afraid of haloperidol and ammonazine like fire, and they stabbed him only when he was punished. They made a man hook and break, drooled, and he could not even mumble, while conscripts, like the subjects, were not given anything. All these days I was tempted to ask my neighbor who he was talking to, and to begin with, at least to get to know him. He was too silent, although it is clear that he was adequate. That morning I decided, as it turned out, he was quite a decent man, a teacher, 32 years old, married, a rare intellectual. And the story of his getting into a nut house was very strange, and that's why I'm writing this story. A month and a half ago, he found a small object near the school, which he mistook for a pencil case lost by one of the students. He looked inside, but found only $10 and nothing else, gave it to the guard, and forgot. That same night, the devil came to him, or something similar, as he said. He was scared and screamed. His wife woke up but saw nothing, decided that it was a terrible dream, and he continued to see it all night. And in the morning, the devil disappeared. The next night, everything happened again. The wife was at work at night, and the devil just stood nearby or sat on the edge of the bed. The next one, too, I thought I was wrong to talk to him. I thought he was sick after all, but no. 4 days later, he decided to talk, or rather, to drive him away, to which the devil began to talk to him. This surprised the teacher. Thoughts of madness were obvious, and so it happened for a week in a row, and these conversations pleased the teacher. The devil revealed to him completely incredible secrets and things that he could not know about. Their communication was noticed by his wife and offered to see a doctor. Since then, he has been here. Naturally, I did not believe it, but the teacher said that the devil accurately predicted even the future. I didn't know what to think, so I suggested playing this game. During the day, I would hide something, and at night he would ask the devil what I had hidden, and in the morning he would show me where and what. I hid a cigarette pack very well in the dining room, and I'm sure no one saw me do it. It's hard to believe, but at breakfast the next day, he told me where and what I had hidden. I was shocked, although, of course, I understood before that this could be my grandmother did magic, but that's how it is in life. I told him that he could use it for the benefit of at least himself, to which he replied that the devil had revealed so many secrets to him that there was no point in proving to someone what he already knew for sure, and that he would soon die. He also said that, like the devil said, I didn't believe him and didn't even ask when. I tried to find out at least something from him from the questions to which there is no specific answer. He said that I did not need it yet, and only said that there is a God. We talked with him for a week and got very close, because I was a little bored with my peers, and on the 8th day after getting up, he just didn't get up, died in his sleep. The rest of the days I was in shock. I couldn't believe it all, but it was. After serving the prescribed period and buying a decent diagnosis from a doctor for a small amount of our family's savings. In fact, I turned out to be healthy, as the fake doctor said, with whom I was not taken into the army. I am still surprised by this story that happened to me, since even after graduating from college and growing up I can't explain it to myself, and my grandmother died before that, and there's no one to ask for an answer, although I don't know if a person can explain it in any way. My parents took me to a psychiatric hospital 3 times, but I served only 2 sentences. I was locked up there for the first time at the age of 17. In the winter of 2001, I don't remember exactly what month, I was in my room when suddenly 3 healthy men in white coats burst into the apartment. They blocked my exit and started saying, "What an intelligent girl and sick." My parents came, said, "Get dressed," and threw clothes on my bed. I replied that I wasn't going anywhere. The doctors kept saying, "Dress nice." I wanted to leave the room, but they grabbed me and dragged me away. I resisted, clinging to the wall with my hands. They were tearing my hands off the wall. They dragged me out of the apartment. She refused to go, lay down on the dirty floor. They took me by the arms and legs and carried me into the elevator. They tore off my jacket. I was screaming, "Help me! The police!" There's a police station in my house, but they didn't even look out into the hallway to see what was going on. Barefoot, without a sweater and slippers, they were dragged down the street to the car. It's cold outside. It's snowing. I burst into tears in the car. People were passing by, watching. My parents came and threw my sneakers into the car. They took me. In the psychiatric hospital, the doctor called me to her office. She looked sick, her eyes bulge out of their sockets, and black bruises under them. How she yelled at me. "Answer me. How was it? Did a voice from above order you?" Some doctor said, "Yes, you can see from her eyes that she is sick." There were wheelchairs there. A woman was lying on the floor, pissing under herself. She couldn't move. They gave her injections endlessly, and then they took her away on a stretcher. The iron door is locked. The key is in the doctor's pocket. I begged my parents to pick me up. They signed the necessary papers and let me go that day. But that was just the beginning. The second time, they took a mental hospital to the nursery. They gave me pills that made me feel very bad. It was hard to walk. They barely made my legs move. I had a feeling that I would fall. I went to bed from one pill for a few days. I looked terrible after it. They vomited something yellow. They were picking at their mouths with their fingers. They looked at whether they drank them or not. They were afraid that they would unclench their teeth, check if I would hide them. The nurse was yelling at me, "Take a pill now!" But the third time was really scary. In an adult psychiatric hospital. As usual, 3 hefty men in white coats burst into the apartment. They didn't stand on ceremony with me. They immediately grabbed me by the neck and dragged me into the car. They grabbed him by the neck very deftly. It is immediately clear that they are trained for patience. This is not the first time they have been grabbed. It was in the evening. It was already dark outside. As soon as they arrived, they forcibly injected the injection. I refused him. The orderly grabbed my arm and yelled, "Do you want to piss me off?" He grabbed her by the neck, probably this is their favorite technique, pinned her to the bed and injected her with psychotropic poison. They were forcibly dragged to the isolation ward where the seriously ill are located. There's a locked door, bars on the windows, and a toilet in the same place. Those who arrive there are not allowed to go outside and into the corridor. The ward is shabby. I didn't want to wear tattered psychiatric clothes, and then the orderly and the nurse forcibly stripped me naked. The finger was twisted, broken to take off the jacket. They shouted, "We'll tie you to the bed now." And there, I noticed, they really like to tie. I remember they brought an old woman. She said she couldn't stay here. She had to go home. She had a lot to do. She sat down on a chair near the door. She was told, "Get into bed." She didn't lie down. Tied to the bed. I went to the bathroom so I wouldn't have to hear the heart-rending screams. They gave a lot of injections, and after the binding she became very abnormal, delirious. The doctors were happy. They were so happy, their faces were red with pleasure. In the morning, they brought me medicine. I asked what it was from, and they answered me rudely. "You should know what medications were prescribed to you." I haven't had a drink. They grabbed me, threw me on the bed. The sadists pinched my nose so that I could not breathe, and I opened my mouth. They tried to pour it in. They laughed that I could hold my breath for a long time, shouted, "Why are you pushing us away with your legs?" It was not possible to pour the medicine, poison. Then they injected the injection by force. After that, I fell into a dream, lost my will. In the evening, 2 more syringes were injected 2 times for 10 days. 1 injection in the morning, 2 in the evening. Then my parents brought me a bag with food and clothes. They were not allowed to go on a date with them. The doctors rummaged through my bag. I stretched out my hand to the bag. They pushed me away. They said, "Don't go where you don't need to." The food was only given, and the rest was locked in the vault. I broke the bars, cut my hands, and I had bruises on them. Then she fell unconscious from the injections. My tongue was twisted. I couldn't eat. How can you eat with your tongue twisted if it's stuck in your throat? My body cramped. I was lying in bed. I couldn't turn over on the other side. I remember waking up for a while when I was staggering and 2 injections crashed into my ass. She was sitting on the bed, unconscious, staring out the window. My mouth was twisting. They put a mug of drink in my hand. I sat holding it in my hand and looked at one point. Then consciousness flashed briefly, brought the drink to my mouth and dropped it. Spilled past my mouth on myself. I remember I was standing, staggering, rolling my eyes to the ceiling, and they put some kind of pill in my mouth. I couldn't eat. I was lying unconscious. They tried to feed me because I couldn't eat myself. They forced me to get up from the bed, sit down, and a nurse poked a spoon with melted cheese into my mouth, which my parents brought me from home. A spoon and cheese. I couldn't even swallow tea. I kept it in my mouth for a long time, lying in bed, until it poured out on its own. That's how they pricked me. My mom came on a date with me. Then I woke up a little. There was a special room in the asylum for visits. That's when I made my escape. The nurse and the nurse were chatting standing near the door. I was nearby, and suddenly the thought flashed through my mind that the door was not locked. My mind cleared. I opened the door very quickly, instantly. It turned out to be really unlocked, and ran outside. The terrain was unfamiliar, but I figured out where to run, ran straight to the fence and climbed over it. There was a drunkard lying near the fence, drunk to the bone. Surprisingly, drunks are lying right under the fence of a mental hospital, and they are not sent to be treated. I barely made it home on shaky legs. No one was happy to see me at home. Screams, screams, crying, hysteria. That's what was waiting for me at home. In the morning, Dad went to the mental hospital, took his things. Arriving from there, he said, "I have to go there with him, pick up my passport." My brains couldn't think of anything from the poison. I didn't understand that I was being deceived. I went. They didn't give me my passport and locked me in the isolation ward again. They continued pumping injections. 30 injections were given in 10 days. I remember I was barely alive at the table. The nurse pushed food into my mouth by force. The sadist almost broke her teeth. She shoved a mug of tea into her mouth and spilled it all over me. She yelled at me a couple of times. She also poured medicine into her mouth. I refused to drink the medicine in the dining room when she was delivering it to everyone, and the cue reached me. Then she grabbed me, dragged me by force to the isolation ward. When they released me from the Psychiatric Hospital prison, this institution can be called that because I was imprisoned there, the doctor, Evgenia, intimidated. "Next time, we won't play with you. Now we've been playing. You will stay with us for at least 3 months." She also spoke when she was put in isolation for refusing to take medicine. "We're trying to humor you. It's you who should obey us, not us. I'm in charge here." I was transferred to an isolation ward from an ordinary ward for another attempt to escape. Then I saw how drunken orderlies with red and swollen muzzles dragged an unconscious woman by the legs. I remember a nurse slapping a seriously ill woman in the face. The same nurse was very fond of yelling hysterically at patients in the isolation ward a little bit at once. I asked her to give me my clothes from the storage, and she yelled at me for some unknown reason. My stomach was very sore from the drugs. Poison. There were terrible pains in my stomach. The whole day usually lasted. That's right, my stomach hurt until I threw up on the floor in the dining room. A nurse was nearby. She saw it, screamed, "My floor!" I went to bed as soon as possible. It was very bad with my stomach. It's all from the drugs. The nurse, the one who used to pour medicine into her mouth for the first time, shoved a pill into her mouth, pushed her finger into her teeth because of her refusal to drink it. And how can they not be disgusted by picking their fingers in someone else's mouth? In the isolation ward, the walls are peeling, painted with white paint, whereas some doctor's office is so decorated, the walls are covered with boards. I saw when the door was open, the furniture is all brand new, the flowers are standing. Important doctors walk around, the keys to all, the doors are in their pocket, they probably have a very pleasant clink. Doctors took sadistic actions that were completely unrelated to treatment, twisting a finger, forcibly changing into hospital clothes, forcibly stuffing food, pinching the nose so that there was nothing to breathe. Is it possible to pour something into your mouth while lying down? You can drown. In a mental hospital, medical staff need muscles more than medical knowledge. They use physical force more often, usually to those who do not want to be treated. Psychiatrists in the hospital are scum, sadists, fanatics. All this happened at the South Oaks Area Hospital. The dull silence of the room was interrupted by the creak of the door opening. The silhouette of a boy, about 13, 14 years old, appeared. He was wearing an old t-shirt and torn pants. He walked slowly across the creaking parquet floor, trying not to make too. Moreover, I would have to work for the car in this way for about a year. And I refuse to work as a cook, because you'll be lucky if you don't get poisoned by my food. But fortunately, my brother's friend needed a guard for some kind of hospital. Guarding a hospital is well, the clock struck 12. Oh, there was a whole night of TV shows and movies waiting for me to entertain myself somehow. I turned on the TV at a low volume and was preparing to have fun when I suddenly heard a terrifying scream from the lower floors, so the night came imperceptibly. I turned on the TV, but there was nothing on the screen except interference. I decided to just sit and watch for any overnight guests. Suddenly, I heard the cries for help from below again. I tensed up a little and began to listen to the voices. I heard a woman's voice. She screamed and begged for mercy. Suddenly, a man's voice rang out and clearly said, "Shut up! "No one will help you here." And something hummed. I was shocked. It didn't sound like the speech of the sick. I decided to check what was going on there. I got up, checked again that the front door was closed, and headed for that ill-fated room. The screams grew fainter and fainter, and the hum grew and grew. And now I was standing at the threshold. He checked to see if there was anyone in the back and slowly opened the door. I've never seen anything like this in my life. In this basement there was a cage in which people were lying. There were tables red with blood next to them. There were red containers next to them. Men and women were lying on the tables, and people in dressing gowns were bending over them, who were slowly cutting them, putting the pieces in containers. I almost threw up. I quickly slammed the door and ran to my post. He grabbed his gun and sat watching every corner of the hall. I couldn't find a place for myself the next day. So what kind of people are they, and why do they suffer such a fate? Suddenly, a thought popped into my head. I remembered that these red containers were loaded into some kind of heavy truck. I decided to follow him. I waited until 1 o'clock in the afternoon and noticed this cart. Yeah, and the truck is there. I quietly went outside, and after loading the car, I followed where it was going. Suddenly she stopped at the end of this house. Oh shit, right in front of the residential entrance and that very cafe. The containers were hurriedly dragged into the building and the car drove away. At that moment, I had an incomprehensible thought. Why would some fast food restaurant need creepy packages from a mental hospital? There are too many questions hanging around this house for me to sit idly by. I decided to figure this shit out completely. Throughout the day, I watched the actions of all the staff. I recognized the office of each doctor and saw how often they looked into the general archive. And there was one. Her name was Valentina Blednova. She visited the archive about 3 times a day. I knew that it was there that the documents and notes I needed were stored. I went to the pharmacy opposite and bought a laxative, after which I invited Valentina for tea, so to speak, to get to know each other better. I poured a horse dose of the drug into her cup and was sure that the toilet would replace her archive for the near future. I took the opportunity to sneak into this room and found a folder with the clinic's contracts with other organizations. I studied the documents for about half an hour and was horrified when the picture finally cleared up in my eyes. This clinic had too many patients at one time, so to speak, and there was nowhere to put them. Her owner decided to pull off a terrible scheme. He deliberately undermined the psyche of healthy people with the help of various hypnosis and videotapes. Then he sent them to the room of the hopeless, and since such people are not needed by either the state or their relatives, they were cut up for meat. And later he signed a contract with the very restaurant where human meat was supplied. Visitors did not even know what they were consuming there, and the owner of the cafe was only profitable because he bought it for a song, and burgers and steaks were very popular with visitors. After that, without taking the money promised for a week of work as a security guard, I packed up and left this building. And I tried never to think about it again. And after a while, this hospital was closed due to inappropriate behavior with patients. All those involved in this case were imprisoned, and this cafe is still popular with young people. That's just the question. What kind of meat do they cook, and where do they get it from?